Have you ever felt punished for being too aware? Not rude, not arrogant, just aware of what people meant but didn't say, of the power dynamics hidden in a friendly tone, of the lies coded in polite silence. It's not that you were loud. It's not that you wanted attention. You simply saw things clearly. And for that, you were labeled as difficult, intense, or too much. Carl Jung once wrote that people don't see the world as it is. They see it as they are. So when you reflect too much truth, too much clarity, they don't admire you. They flinch. Because in a society built on appearances, truth feels violent. It threatens the masks people wear to survive. And you? You become a problem simply for refusing to play blind. You've likely been there. You say something honest and the room goes quiet. You point out the flaw in a system and suddenly you're the target. You name the tension no one else will speak about, and they resent you for it. It's not your tone. It's not your timing. It's the fact that you saw. Because clarity is not neutral. It creates discomfort, and discomfort in the wrong minds breeds hostility. This is the unseen burden of the perceptive, the emotional tax of the intelligent. Not because you're wrong, but because most people aren't ready for what's obvious to you. So what do you do with that weight? You either carry it like a weapon, out loud, confrontational, and prepare for exile. Or you do what the truly strategic do. You learn to see everything but show almost nothing. You watch in silence. You observe the cracks, map the inconsistencies, register the game. But you do it with a still face, a relaxed tone, a presence so unthreatening that no one sees what you've already figured out. This is where the real survival begins, not in being louder, but in being smarter, quietly. They tell you to be yourself. But the moment you are, fully unapologetically, you notice something shifts, not in you, but around you. People pull back. They laugh nervously. They look at you with suspicion, or worse, with envy, dressed as indifference. The truth is, most people aren't reacting to your personality. They're reacting to what your presence implies. Competence threatens insecurity. Self-possession disrupts group hierarchy. When you carry yourself like you don't need validation, those who rely on it begin to feel exposed. That's why, sometimes, you learn to soften your edges, to mute your brilliance, to let others speak first, even when you already know where it's going. Not because you're weak, but because you've learned something most never do. Raw intelligence, when unfiltered, is socially radioactive. Jung wrote that the shadow isn't just what we hide from others, it's what others can't accept in us. And too often, what they can't accept is your clarity, your insight, your refusal to play small. So what's the strategy? You stay aware, but not obvious. You reveal just enough to be understood, never enough to be resented. You let others feel wise. You plant your truths like seeds, not swords. You become the architect of conversations without needing credit for the blueprint. Because here's what you've realized. If you always speak the whole truth, you become uninvited. If you always correct the error, you become unlikable. And if you always show how much you know, you become a threat no one asked for. So instead, you move with restraint. You edit yourself, not out of shame, but out of strategy. You downplay your strengths, not because they aren't real, but because they don't need to be proven to matter. You're not here to impress. You're here to influence. And influence, the lasting kind, doesn't come from being the loudest voice. It comes from being the voice others choose to listen to. So you learn to downplay, to understate, to hold back until it counts. Pretending to be less than you are isn't surrender. It's a tactic, a deliberate shift in posture, not identity. You don't stop being sharp. You stop letting your sharpness cut the wrong people. You don't stop seeing. You just stop pointing out what you see in rooms that aren't ready to look. There's an art to it, not hiding, not lying, but minimizing the signal until it's safe to broadcast. You shrink, not because you're small, but because the environment can't handle your full size. Think of it like camouflage. In certain spaces, too much visibility gets you targeted, so you adapt. You listen more than you speak. You ask more than you answer. You give just enough to be respected, not enough to be envied. It's not manipulation. It's strategy. It's choosing long-term impact over short-term validation. And if you do it right, no one sees the power you're holding. You blend in. You stay under radar. But behind the scenes, you're collecting data, building leverage, studying how people move, how systems protect themselves, how mediocrity reinforces itself. Because when the moment comes, when power is up for grabs, you won't need to shout. You'll be the one who already knows where the pressure points are. You'll strike with precision, not noise. This is what strategic self-minimization gives you. Options, freedom, silence, weaponized. It's not about dimming your light. It's about knowing when to let it burn, and when to let them think there's nothing there at all. You don't need the world to notice you immediately. You need them to underestimate you consistently, because underestimated players don't get blocked. They get overlooked, and in the game of power, being overlooked is the perfect cover. We like to believe that society rewards intelligence, courage, and authenticity. But that's a fantasy sold to keep us obedient. In reality, systems reward one thing above all: predictability. Not brilliance, not boldness. But the kind of personality that blends in, follows instructions, and doesn't make others feel inadequate. The world, as it's built, doesn't promote the most capable. It elevates the least threatening. Think about the environments you've moved through. Schools that praise quiet compliance over curiosity. Jobs that favor agreeable mediocrity over disruptive innovation. Friend groups that become tense the moment someone refuses to laugh along. What's being rewarded here isn't your value, it's your containment. Because a person who can't be controlled, who sees through illusion and isn't afraid to name it, is dangerous. Not because they harm anyone, but because their clarity reveals how much of the system is fake. This is why the intelligent so often find themselves punished in subtle ways. They are left out of decisions, talked about but not to, smiled at but secretly excluded. And it's not a glitch. It's design. Control thrives in environments where no one questions the narrative, and questioning becomes a threat, not to peace, but to power. So what happens? You learn. You adjust. You give the system what it wants on the surface, while protecting your independence underneath. You become the type of person who can move through a room without raising alarms. Who knows how to make others feel safe, even if you're 10 steps ahead? Who wears simplicity like a costume, while complexity waits underneath? And here's the paradox. The less threatening you appear, the more access you gain. People open up to the harmless. They reveal their plans, their fears, their limits, because they don't expect judgment. And if you know how to listen without reacting, to blend without submitting, you become the most informed person in the room. Not because you talk the most, but because you've made everyone else feel like they're safe enough to speak freely. Systems reward the harmless. But those who master harmlessness as strategy, they don't just survive the system, they use it. Disappearing is not retreat, it's design. We grow up believing visibility equals value. That being noticed means you matter. That presence equals power. But ask yourself, who are the most powerful people in the world? Are they the loudest? The most public? Or are they the ones who operate behind closed doors, whose influence is felt without ever being seen? The ones who master disappearance know something others don't. Power isn't about being seen, it's about not needing to be. When you disappear strategically, you're not vanishing, you're repositioning. You remove yourself from noise, distraction, and unnecessary conflict. You stop offering explanations. You stop chasing recognition. And in that absence, you gain leverage. Because the moment you step back, two things happen. People notice your absence, and they start to imagine your presence. They replay your words. They feel the weight of your silence. They wonder what you're planning. And suddenly, you're everywhere, without being anywhere at all. This is the power of the unseen, the ability to control the temperature of a room without being in it, the ability to drive behavior without giving instructions. Invisibility gives you options that visibility never will. You make fewer mistakes because fewer people are watching. You learn more because you're underestimated. You take fewer hits because no one knows where to aim. And when you return, if you return, it's on your terms. You're no longer part of the noise. You become an event, a presence that disrupts, not fills. But this art of disappearance isn't about isolation. It's about elevation. It's about removing yourself from cycles designed to drain you, from dynamics that force you to explain, justify, defend. Because once you understand that power flows in silence, you stop announcing yourself. You stop playing the role they wrote for you. You become untouchable, not because you're hiding, but because they can't find where to grab you. Every time you resist the urge to react, you gain distance. And distance in this world is power. We've been conditioned to equate withdrawal with weakness. But in truth, withdrawal is sometimes the wisest move on the board. It's the move that allows you to watch everything unfold, to gather data, to reset the narrative without confrontation. Jung called it individuation, the process of stepping outside the collective to find your form. And that form doesn't need applause to exist. So when you disappear, don't do it with bitterness. Do it with intent. Do it to regroup, to recenter, to re-enter sharper than before. Because those who know how to vanish also know how to strike. There's a kind of strength that doesn't look like strength at all. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It doesn't even react. It just exists, quietly, immovably, unshaken by chaos. This is the psychology of being untouchable, not in the arrogant sense, not in the I'm above everyone posture, but in the deep internal way where nothing outside of you can dictate your value, provoke your reaction, or distort your direction. Jung understood this in his studies of the self. He called it individuation, the point at which you become whole enough to no longer require permission from the crowd. Most people are walking negotiations. They adjust who they are depending on who they're with. They shrink when they sense disapproval. They inflate when they're praised. Their identity is a mirror, constantly reflecting the room. But the untouchable person doesn't reflect. They radiate. They don't broadcast superiority. They simply stop seeking reinforcement. And that alone, removing yourself from the currency of validation, makes you feel dangerous to those who still depend on it. You stop being easy to manipulate. You stop being predictable. You stop being useful to those who thrive on emotional access. Because if you can't be provoked, you can't be steered. And if you don't seek approval, you can't be baited. This terrifies the world. Why? Because our systems, social, political, economic, are built to control through reaction. They rely on fear, flattery, offense, urgency. But what happens when none of that works on you? You become unreadable, unmoved, a variable no one accounted for. And now they don't know what to do with you. They can't categorize you. They can't guilt you. They can't reward you into compliance. You're no longer part of the game. You're not louder. You're not faster. You're not more aggressive. You're simply unavailable. Unavailable to chaos. Unavailable to manipulation. Unavailable to the emotional traps people use to drag you into their storms. And this is not detachment. It's sovereignty. It's the conscious choice to belong to yourself before anyone else. Untouchability is not about power over others. It's about full command of your own internal landscape. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to prove. You don't even need to defend. Because when you stop reacting, they lose access. And when they lose access, they lose control. That's when you know you've arrived, not above others, but beyond them, in a place where nothing external determines your peace, your pace, or your power. Power doesn't reward speed, it rewards timing. But most people can't wait. They rush, they react, they show their cards before the table is even set, because they've been conditioned to believe that visibility is momentum, and that momentum means progress. But that's not strategy. That's anxiety in motion. If you want real power, not performance, not applause, but durable, structural power, you must learn to play the long game. That means doing things that make no sense to the impatient. It means planting seeds you may not harvest for months, even years. It means building when no one is watching, studying when everyone else is broadcasting, listening when others are shouting, disappearing while they waste energy proving they exist. Most people are addicted to short-term feedback. They want likes, validation, immediate confirmation that they're doing it right. But the long game doesn't reward the loud. It rewards the still, the calculating. The ones who know that empires aren't made in moments. They're made in silence, step by step, choice by choice. This is the way real players move. They don't show their strategy. They don't explain their plans. They let others talk, overcommit, overexpose. And then, when the path is clear, they move. Swift, clean, decisive. If you want to stop being manipulated, start mastering time. If you want to stop being played, start observing patterns instead of reacting to moments. You don't need to rush to prove you're relevant. You need to become so precise that when you do act, it's unstoppable. Jung said the most dangerous individuals aren't those who fight the system openly. It's those who learn to bend it, quietly. Because if you know how the game works, you don't need to fight. You position yourself where the pieces must fall in your favor. The long game is boring for those who need attention, but for those who crave actual influence, it's the only game that matters. So here's the final question. Do you want to be seen, or do you want to be followed? Because the ones who are followed didn't get there by shouting. They got there by building something solid, then letting others come to it. This is your moment to shift, from noise to precision, from reaction to orchestration, from being noticed to being remembered. Forget applause. Forget urgency. Forget the trap of proving. Start building like you already know where this leads. Because if you master this level of control, of patience, of unseen movement, you won't just survive, you'll win. You were never the fool, even when they looked at you like you didn't understand. Even when they laughed, dismissed, underestimated, you weren't confused. You were watching. Because here's the truth they don't want to accept. Fools don't listen this long. Fools don't observe this deeply. Fools don't hold their fire while everyone else sets theirs to burn. You were quiet, but calculating. Still, but deliberate, present, but untouchable. And all this time, they mistook your restraint for weakness. That's the move they'll never see coming, because the world trains us to perform, to prove, to respond on cue, to exhaust ourselves trying to be seen by people who never intended to understand us. But you didn't play their game. You stepped out of frame, and from that distance, you saw it for what it is, an endless loop of noise, insecurity, and validation addiction. Let others chase applause. Let others broadcast every move. You've already seen where that path leads. You're not here to be consumed. You're here to build, in silence, with precision, without permission. This is the highest level, the power that isn't noticed until it's already shaped the room. Not every strategy needs to be explained. Not every truth needs to be defended. And not every move needs to be visible. Because if they don't see you coming, they can't stop you. If they don't know where you're going, they can't follow. And if they never understood your silence, they'll never survive your return. So go now, quietly, dangerously. Let them underestimate you one last time. It'll be the last time they ever get the chance.